Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I want you to picture the most educated, the most morally refined leaders in a society.
Yeah, the elites.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, picture those same leaders using all of their privilege, their massive theological vocabulary, and their legal procedures to just, orchestrate a murder in the middle of the night.
It is a chilling picture, honestly.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that is the reality we are looking at today. Our mission for this deep dive is to do an intensive verse-by-verse analysis of Matthew chapter 27, verses 1 and 2.
Just 2 verses, but there is a massive amount of weight in them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We are setting the scene at the very dawn of Friday in ancient Jerusalem. And in just these 2 brief verses, the text details the staggering transition of Jesus Christ from the religious court of Israel over to the secular civil authority of Rome.
Which is a huge shift.
Yeah. When you pause to visualize the historical weight of this moment, it stops you in your tracks. We are not looking at an uneducated mob acting in a fit of sudden rage here.
No, not at all. These are the highly trained elites.
Right. So the question I want to pose to you, the listener, is this. How do the most religiously educated people in the entire nation end up conspiring against the very Messiah their own scriptures promised?
That is the big question. And it brings us to the overarching theological paradox of this entire text.
Which is what, precisely?
Well, on one hand, we are looking at the absolute darkest human conspiracy in all of recorded history. These religious leaders, they act with premeditated malice. They are fully responsible for their wickedness.
I mean, they are making real, uncoerced choices, right?
Yeah, precisely. No one is forcing them. Yet, at the exact same time, we are witnessing the absolute, unshakable sovereignty of God executing his redemptive plan.
That is such a heavy concept to grasp.
It really is. The Father is governing these wicked actions to accomplish the salvation of his people. The human authorities are choosing to condemn Jesus, but their unholy consensus is the precise mechanism God uses to secure the redemption of his church.
So we are seeing human guilt and divine providence just intersecting perfectly.
Yeah, without either compromising the other.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to grasp the massive weight of this morning meeting mentioned in verse 1, you have to understand what happened the night before.
And you have to know the incredibly strict rules governing that era.
Right. So I was reading up on the Jewish Mishnah, specifically a tractate called Sanhedrin, and it outlines these rigid judicial laws, especially concerning the death penalty.
Yeah, those procedures were designed to make execution exceedingly rare.
Right. Capital trials could only happen during daylight hours. They had to take place in a specific location called the Chamber of Hewn Stones.
Which was situated right on the Temple Mount.
Yeah. Furthermore, a guilty verdict could not be rendered on the same day as the trial. The judges were required to go home in pairs, eat sparingly, drink 0 wine, and literally sleep on the decision for a full night before casting a final vote of condemnation.
And what's fascinating here is the underlying logic behind those rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Jewish legal framework historically placed a massive premium on protecting human life. The system was designed to prevent rapid, emotionally driven executions.
So the mandatory overnight delay was meant to, allow tempers to cool down.
Yeah, exactly that. And to give any witness for the defense one last chance to come forward. But the night trial at the Palace of Caiaphas broke every single one of those procedural safeguards.
Every single one.
All of them. It happened in the dead of night. It took place in a private residence rather than the Chamber of Hewn Stones.
Yeah.
And they pronounced him guilty of blasphemy immediately.
Wow.
Yeah, they threw their own revered legal tradition right out the window the moment it became inconvenient.
So in verse 1 says, when morning came, this is not just a casual time marker.
No, not at all.
This indicates a frantic scramble by the chief priests and elders. I mean, they are rushing to hold a formal daylight session to put a legal veneer over their illegal nocturnal actions.
That is a great way to put it.
It is like a corrupt corporate board of directors holding a 6:00 a.m. rubber stamp meeting. They are rushing to finalize a hostile takeover before the regulators wake up and catch them breaking the bylaws.
That is spot on. But they have another massive obstacle.
Rome.
Yeah, they have to deal with the Roman jurisdiction. Rome did not just let conquered territories govern themselves completely. Pontius Pilate held something called the imperium and the aetius gladii.
Okay, let's break down those Latin terms for the listener.
Sure. So imperium refers to the absolute executive command over a Roman province, and aetius gladii translates literally to the right of the sword.
So that meant Pilate possessed the sole exclusive right of capital execution.
Precisely. The local religious authorities could handle minor infractions, temple disputes, things like that, but they could not legally put a man to death.
I read that the Jerusalem Talmud and the historian Josephus both note that Israel lost the right to carry out the death penalty about 40 years prior to the destruction of the temple.
Which aligns perfectly with the time frame of the crucifixion. They could pronounce Jesus guilty of a religious crime, but they needed Rome to actually kill him.
Okay, wait. I need to push back on that for a second.
Go for it.
If Israel lost the right to execute people, how were they able to stone Stephen later on in the book of Acts? Did I miss something there?
That is a really fantastic question.
Or, if they wanted Jesus dead so badly right now, why not just assassinate him in the dark?
Oh.
Or stone him quietly in an alleyway and claim it was an accident?
Right. Why go through the massive hassle of waking up the Roman governor?
Yeah, exactly. Why involve Pilate at all?
Well, the stoning of Stephen provides a perfect contrast. That stoning was technically an illegal mob lynching.
Yeah.
The Roman authorities either turned a blind eye to it or simply could not stop it in time.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
But the situation with Jesus was entirely different due to the geographical and political pressure of the Passover festival.
Because of the crowds.
Yes. During this specific week, Jerusalem swelled from a normal population of perhaps 50,000 to several 100,000 pilgrims.
That is a massive influx of people.
It is. The city was a tinderbox of religious fervor and nationalistic expectation. The Roman governor, Pilate, would move from his coastal headquarters in Caesarea to Jerusalem specifically to keep the peace.
And he brought troops with him, right?
Oh, a massive garrison of soldiers. They would be stationed in the Antonia fortress looking directly down into the temple courts.
So the whole city is heavily policed, and the crowds are already on edge.
Precisely. The religious leaders were pragmatic cowards. They feared a massive riot from the crowds who had just recently waved palm branches and shouted Hosanna for Jesus.
So a quiet assassination was too risky.
Way too risky. If they attempted an illegal stoning, they risked turning Jesus into a martyr and sparking an uncontrollable uprising among the Galilean pilgrims who loved him.
So bringing him to Rome was a strategic move.
Yes. By bringing Jesus to the Romans, they could secure a public, state-sanctioned execution.
And crucifixion itself played a role in that strategy, right?
Oh, absolutely. Crucifixion was designed by Rome to publicly shame and utterly discredit the victim. A crucified man was seen as cursed by God.
Wow. So they really wanted to ruin his reputation, not just kill him.
Yeah, but to get the Roman governor to agree to this, the Sanhedrin had to translate a religious charge into a political one.
Because Pilate would not care in the slightest about a Jewish debate over blasphemy.
Right. Therefore, the leaders had to frame Jesus as a revolutionary insurgent claiming to be a king. They had to accuse him of treason against Caesar to force Pilate's hand.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The original Greek text reveals the terrifying, cold-blooded administration behind this act.
The grammar itself is incredibly revealing.
Yeah. We shift from the historical pressure to the specific words Matthew uses to indict these leaders. The phrase translated took counsel is a known Latinism coming from the phrase concilium capere.
Which means it is not a casual chat over breakfast.
No, not at all. This denotes a formal, official administrative decision. Matthew uses this specific phrase 5 times in his gospel, and it always denotes a calculated, bureaucratic plot to suppress truth.
It is the language of systemic corruption.
Yeah. And we also have to look at who exactly is sitting at this table. Matthew specifies that all the chief priests and elders gathered.
The Greek word pantis, it leaves no room for exception.
Right. There are no dissenting voices speaking up for justice. It is a corporate, unanimous rejection by both the Sadducean priests and the Pharisaic elders.
And those two groups usually despised each other.
Yeah, the Sadducees were the aristocratic elites who controlled the temple treasury. They only accepted the first 5 books of Moses.
While the Pharisees were the popular, rigorous teachers of the law who believed in the resurrection and the entire Old Testament.
They argued constantly. But here, they unite in their sheer hatred of the Messiah.
It is amazing how hatred for truth creates strange alliances. The Greek grammar also utilizes something called a telic purpose clause here, stating their goal was to put him to death.
Okay, let's unpack telic purpose clause for the listener so it doesn't sound like a grammar textbook.
Good idea.
In normal English, what does that indicate about their mindset?
Well, a telic purpose clause simply means the text is explicitly defining the ultimate intended goal of an action. It answers the why behind the what.
So it shows their true motive.
Yeah. Their gathering was not an investigative hearing to discover facts. Their goal was not banishment. Their goal was not physical discipline or silencing him through intimidation.
It was execution.
Right. The grammar itself proves premeditated first-degree murder. Their explicit unified aim was to end his life.
You know, that unanimous murderous intent perfectly illustrates a core reality about human nature.
It really does.
I feel like this text completely dismantles the modern assumption that education, institutional refinement, and cultural sophistication naturally elevate human morality.
Oh, completely. We tend to think that if people just have enough religious training and structural order, they will naturally choose what is right.
Yeah, we assume that cruelty is just a symptom of ignorance. But here we see the most conservative, orthodox religious system in the ancient world, manufacturing its own righteousness and violently attacking the true king.
Which points back to the total depravity of the human heart.
Exactly. Without God actively intervening to renew the mind, the human heart will always construct a system of self-sovereignty.
These men possessed the scriptures, the covenant promises, and the history of the prophets. Yet they used that magnificent heritage to orchestrate a murder.
Which proves that no human institution is immune to complete spiritual blindness.
None. The Sanhedrin was the supreme court of the nation. These were men who had memorized massive portions of scripture. They could debate the finest nuances of the law.
Yet when the living word stood right in front of them, they perceived him as a threat to be eliminated rather than a lord to be worshipped.
Yeah, they used their theological vocabulary to mask their own desire for control. They wanted the benefits of the covenant without submitting to the Lord of the covenant.
I want you to reflect on that reality for a moment. Proximity to religion does not equal submission to God.
That is a staggering truth.
These leaders knew the altar, they knew the sacrifices, and they knew the law inside and out. Yet they used that knowledge as a weapon to protect their own status. They wore the pristine robes of righteousness while plotting in the dark.
It is hypocrisy at its absolute worst.
Right. So having finalized their illegal paperwork in the dawn light, the leaders take a physical action that carries massive theological weight.
Moving on to verse 2.
Yeah. We look at the beginning of verse 2, which states, "And they bound him."
The Greek participle used here, desantes, shows Jesus being physically tied with ropes or chains.
Think about the brutal irony here. Throughout his public ministry, Jesus had bound the strong man, Satan, by casting out demons.
He healed the sick, he raised the dead.
He commanded the wind and the waves. Now, the inherently free creator of the universe is being physically bound by fallen, fragile men.
We have to look at the Old Testament types to grasp the gravity of this specific physical action.
What do you mean by types?
Well, binding a captive in the ancient Near East was a visual declaration of absolute subjugation. It was the ultimate stripping of sovereignty.
So when you bound a king, you were displaying to the world that his reign was over.
Exactly. But for a Jewish reader, this moment echoes a very specific event.
The Akida.
Yes, the Akida, or the binding of Isaac in Genesis chapter 22. In that narrative, Abraham binds his beloved son and places him on the wood of the altar.
And the son offers zero resistance.
Right. It also brings to mind Psalm 118, verse 27, which says, "Bind the sacrifice with cords, even to the horns of the altar."
So the physical restraint of Jesus is not an accident of the arrest process. It is a massive theological fulfillment.
Thoroughly. It highlights two vital aspects of his redemptive work, his active and passive obedience.
Let's define those concepts simply for the listener.
Sure. His active obedience refers to how he perfectly fulfilled the law throughout his entire life. He never once sinned or deviated from the Father's will.
So he lived the perfect life we failed to live.
Yes. And his passive obedience refers to how he willingly submits his physical body to the penalties of our sin.
He allows himself to suffer the wrath we deserved.
Precisely. He allows himself to be bound so that those who are captives to sin can be loosed. The ropes on his wrists are the physical manifestation of him taking on the bondage of his people.
I love that. To make this visual, picture a reigning monarch sitting on a throne, willingly putting on a pair of plastic handcuffs offered by a rebellious toddler.
That is a brilliant analogy.
That is the level of condescension happening here. The creator of the wood and the hemp is allowing his creatures to tie him up.
It is unfathomable love.
But put yourself in the shoes of a first-century Jewish Christian audience reading Matthew's gospel. They were facing severe persecution.
Yeah, they're being kicked out of their synagogues.
Shunned by their families, marginalized by their communities. To them, Wouldn't a bound Messiah look like a defeated Messiah? How does Matthew counter that fear in his writing?
Matthew's audience was indeed reeling from that expulsion, and they desperately needed to know that the synagogue leaders had lost their true authority.
So how does this scene help them?
Well, by showing Jesus willingly submitting to these bonds, Matthew proves this is not a tragic accident or a failure of strength.
Jesus had already stated during his arrest in the garden that he could call down 12 legions of angels to deliver him.
Right. He could have vaporized the entire Sanhedrin with a single word. His restraint is not a lack of strength. It is a demonstration of his saving mercy.
So Matthew is showing these persecuted believers that the very leaders who excommunicated them had also conspired against the Lord of glory.
Precisely. The national leadership had forfeited their spiritual authority through this deliberate apostasy.
The Sanhedrin's judgment against Jesus was actually a judgment against themselves.
Yes. Therefore, the persecuted church could look at the bound Christ and realize that walking the path of shame, rejection, and suffering is actually the path of true obedience.
They were not losing their religion by being kicked out of the synagogue. They were following their king.
Which is such a comforting truth.
Yeah, it really is. Now that binding prepares Jesus for the formal transfer of custody. And that brings us to the final clause of verse 2.
The text says, "and delivered him over to Pilate the governor."
This marks the physical movement from the religious jurisdiction of the covenant nation over to the secular pagan empire.
And the use of the specific title hegemon for Pilate is historically precise.
I know we have extra biblical proof for that, right?
We do. We know from the historian Tacitus, as well as the archaeological discovery of the Caesarea Maritima Pilate stone, that Pilate was indeed the prefect of Judea during this exact time frame.
And he was known for being brutal, dismissive of Jewish customs, and highly prone to violence.
The Jewish leaders knew this perfectly well. They knew they were handing Jesus over to a man who had zero qualms about executing peasants.
And that reality makes the theology of this phrase so crucial.
Yes, the verb translated delivered over is paradeuken.
Let's talk about that word.
This verb is the theological linchpin of the entire Passion narrative. It is not just a description of a prisoner transfer.
It has Old Testament roots.
It does. It mirrors the Hebrew word masar, found in Isaiah 53, describing the suffering servant who is delivered up for transgressions.
Wow.
The breathtaking paradox here is found in the dual nature of the cross.
Explain what you mean by that dual nature.
On a strictly human level, we see a chain of wicked betrayals. Judas handed Jesus over to the Sanhedrin out of greed.
The Sanhedrin handed him over to Pilate out of envy.
And Pilate will eventually hand him over to the soldiers to be crucified out of political cowardice.
Every human actor in this sequence is driven by sinful motives.
But on a divine level, God the Father is the one delivering up his own Son for the sins of his people.
So the human actors are committing cosmic treason, but the Father is orchestrating a cosmic payment for sin.
That is the truth proclaimed later in the New Testament. God did not spare his own Son, but delivered him up for us all.
You also have a covenantal divorce happening right here in this verse.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Israel's leaders are officially handing their true king over to pagan tyranny. Later in the narrative, they will explicitly shout that they have no king but Caesar.
Oh, yeah. That is a chilling moment.
And this drastically widens the scope of guilt. Both Jew and Gentile, religious and secular, are entirely implicated in the execution of Christ.
Nobody gets to claim the moral high ground here.
No one. The religious elite conspired, and the secular state executed. We have to pull back from the micro details of the text to view the massive theological skyline Matthew is building.
It is a massive skyline.
If humans are freely acting with such calculated malice, who is actually in control of history?
This connects directly to Psalm 2, which states that the kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed.
So the religious leaders act freely.
Without any external coercion, completely fulfilling their own wicked desires. They are doing precisely what their fallen hearts want to do.
Nobody is forcing them to hate Jesus.
Right. Yet simultaneously, they are executing the precise, predetermined, redemptive plan of God.
The cross stands as the highest demonstration of God's meticulous providence over evil.
God governs the absolute worst conspiracy in the history of the world to achieve the greatest salvation conceivable.
This reality shatters the concept that humans possess a neutral free will that will naturally choose God.
Oh, absolutely.
When you look at this text, you see proof that when humans are left to their own devices, Even the most religious, educated, and refined among us will choose to execute God.
We do not naturally seek him. We naturally rebel against him.
This completely confronts modern, pragmatic, seeker-sensitive church models as well.
How so?
Well, those models assume that if you just make the message appealing enough or if you lower the demands, the world will accept it.
But the leaders of Israel did not reject Jesus because he lacked cultural relevance.
Or because his teaching was too confusing. They understood his claims perfectly.
Right. They rejected him because his absolute lordship threatened their autonomy.
They wanted to run their own lives. And a sovereign king was an intolerable threat to that control.
This raises a vital point regarding how we view human institutions today. We often place a massive amount of trust in courts, governments, and religious bodies to secure justice.
But Matthew 27 proves that institutional structures, no matter how historic or revered, are entirely capable of turning violently against the truth. So if the text shows that human institutions are entirely capable of such massive failure, how does this provide comfort for someone listening today who feels overwhelmed by cultural or institutional corruption?
It does seem like a very dark picture at first glance.
It does. It feels hopeless if you just look at the human level.
But the comfort is found in the inescapable sovereignty of God. Look at what God is doing in this text.
He is taking the darkest morning in history.
Yes. If God can take the darkest, most corrupt morning in human history, a morning where the Supreme Court of the nation gathered to illegally murder the innocent Son of God, and use that specific event to break the chains of sin and death forever, then no modern crisis can thwart his plans. No political failure, no institutional apostasy, and no cultural decline can outmaneuver the providence of God.
He is never caught off guard.
Never. The believer can look at the chaos of the world, see the corruption in high places, and still know that the Lord is seated securely on his throne,
Orchestrating all things for the good of his people and the glory of his name.
The cross is the ultimate proof that God turns the malice of men into the salvation of the world.
Let us summarize the progression we have traced this morning. The dawn brings formal, calculated resolution to an illegal night trial.
The unified council of the elites reveals thorough religious rebellion across all party lines.
The physical binding of Jesus displays his voluntary substitution for sinners, fulfilling the ancient prophecies.
And the delivery to Pilate sets the historical stage for the final atonement,
Implicating both the religious and the secular world in the rejection of the king. As a listener, you must realize that neutrality toward Jesus is a total myth.
You cannot just admire him as a harmless moral teacher from antiquity.
He will not allow that option. You either join the council against him to maintain your own autonomy, or you bow to him as the sovereign Lord. There is no middle ground.
Consider the physical ropes that bound the wrists of Jesus that morning.
Such a powerful image.
He, the creator of the universe, allowed himself to be tied by those rough, common ropes. He allowed his hands to be restrained so that the spiritual chains holding you could be shattered permanently.
He absorbed the humiliation of a bound captive so that you could experience the freedom of a beloved child.
The next time you feel trapped by your own failures or overwhelmed by the corruption of the world around you, picture the innocent king who willingly chose to be bound for your freedom.
Thank you for joining this deep dive on Reformed thinking.